Hello, welcome to the Daily News Ukraine channel. Today is December 9th and our daily review of news about Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky discussed the implementation of the peace formula, defense and energy cooperation with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. I maintain a regular dialogue with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Today we discussed the implementation of our peace formula, cooperation on defense capabilities and energy stability of Ukraine, Zelensky posted on Twitter. In addition, the leaders synchronized positions before the G7 online summit. As reported, addressing the G20 summit participants on November 15, President Volodymyr Zelensky proposed a peace formula and outlined 10 mandatory conditions for ending the war in Ukraine. In particular, he mentioned radiation, nuclear, food, and energy security, release of all prisoners and deportees, implementation of the UN Charter and restoration of the territorial integrity of Ukraine and the world order, withdrawal of Russian troops and cessation of hostilities, restoration of justice, fight against ecocide, prevention of escalation, consolidation of the end of the war. OL. Since October 10, the Russians have fired more than 1,000 missiles and drones at the Ukrainian energy infrastructure facilities. More than 1,000 heavy missiles and drones have been fired at the Ukrainian energy infrastructure facilities since October 10. We survived 8 large waves and more than a dozen smaller strikes, Volodymyr Kudrytsky, CEO of Ukrenergo National Power Company, said during a briefing at the media center Ukrein-Ukrinform. He said that the restoration of damaged objects, mainline substations and power plants owned by private and state enterprises, is underway continuously. Kudrytsky also noted that the latest Russian attack on the energy system did not have such devastating consequences as the previous ones and praised the work of air defense units. According to his assessment, the energy system recovered quite quickly after the latest attack, and no imbalance was observed. As reported, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed 14 Shahid drones on the night of December 6 to 7. On December 5, the defense forces shot down more than 60 Russian missiles fired in another massive attack on Ukraine. Massive attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure have been ongoing since October 10. Germany will send 18 RCH-155 self-propelled howitzers, 80 pickup trucks, 90 counter-drone equipment units, and other security assistance to Ukraine. Germany will hand over 18 RCH-155 self-propelled howitzers, 80 pickup trucks, 2 hangar tents, 7 trucks, and 90 counter-drone equipment units to Ukraine, the German embassy in Ukraine posted on Twitter. Over the past week, Ukraine received 20 Dingo armored vehicles and 2 Oshkosh M1070 tank transporter tractor units, the embassy noted. As reported, the German government sent 9 powerful generators worth over €1 million to Odesa. OL. Ukraine is currently trying to protect the democracy of the entire civilized world, so support for Ukraine cannot be considered charity. Total aid committed to Ukraine reached €113 billion as of this week. It's not charity to support Ukraine. We are trying to protect freedom and democracy of all the civilized world, Minister of Finance of Ukraine Serhiy Marchenko told the Associated Press in an interview. Marchenko said financial support for Ukraine is tiny compared to what developed countries spent to combat emergencies like the global financial crisis of 2008 and the COVID-19 pandemic. Total aid committed to Ukraine reached €113 billion as of this week, according to data compiled by the Ukraine Support Tracker at the Kiel Institute for the World Economy. Read also, PM Shmihal, Ukraine expects to counter $38 billion budget deficit with support from partners. Now is not the time to postpone any support, to just be tired of Ukraine and Ukraine's problems, because the next time, you realize that without Ukraine, Russia will come closer to the European border. It's about self-preservation, it's self-protection, this should be in the minds of EU citizens, Marchenko added. The minister praised what he called continuing strong support from Western governments, citing the US in particular. As reported, the US government announced the provision of $4.5 billion budget support to Ukraine. OL. The United States and other G7 countries support the peace plan proposed by President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky. Now it is very clear who is on the side of peace and who is on the side of war. President Zelensky spoke about the peace plan, which consists of 10 points. We, the United States and G7 countries, support this plan because we believe it could be a potential plan to end the war. Just this Monday, Russia again fired 70 missiles at Ukrainian cities. Now it is absolutely clear that the Russians do not want to end the war. The US supports peace. The peace that was proposed in Zelensky's plan, US Ambassador to Ukraine Brink told Channel 24 in an interview. According to the diplomat, how and when the war will end depends on President Zelensky. At the same time, she recalled the statement made by US leader Joe Biden that if the Russians want to stop the war, Putin can do it simply right now. He should stop, withdraw his troops, and the war will end. Read also, Ambassador Brink, US to help Ukraine protect and repair civilian infrastructure. As reported, during the G20 summit, Volodymyr Zelensky announced a peace plan to stop Russian aggression. The 10-point plan envisages coordination of international efforts to establish nuclear, energy, and food security. One of the key provisions is the withdrawal of Russian troops from the entire territory of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. OL. Estonia has sent 11 more buses with generators and energy equipment to Ukraine, with the cargo going to Zhytomyr, Kharkiv, Bucha, and Poltava. Ukraine's ambassador to Estonia Mariana Betsa said this on Twitter, Ukrinform reports. Another 11 buses with generators and energy equipment left Estonia for Ukraine, namely, for Zhytomyr, Kharkiv, Bucha, and Poltava. Grateful to at MF Estonia, at MCIP Ukraine at Econ Min Estonia for humanitarian assurance to help Ukrainian people. #Stop Russia, #Stand with Ukraine pic.twitter.com/9kwtsx02nl, Mariana Betsa, at Mariana_Betsa, December 9, 2022. Another 11 buses with generators and energy equipment left Estonia for Ukraine, namely for Zhytomyr, Kharkiv, Bucha and Poltava. Grateful to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Estonia, the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine and the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications of Estonia for humanitarian assurance to help Ukrainian people, the diplomat said. On December 2, Estonia sent a batch of humanitarian aid to the Kharkiv region, which included 9 buses. The third ship with 25,000 tons of Ukrainian wheat for Somalia left the port of Odesa on December 9 as part of the Grain from Ukraine Humanitarian Food Initiative. According to Ukrinform, the press service of the Ministry of Infrastructure of Ukraine reported this on Facebook. Grain from Ukraine, 25,000 tons of food wheat from Ukraine went to Somalia. The bulk carrier Neva left the port of Odesa today and is moving along the grain corridor as part of a caravan, the report said. Oleksandr Kuberkov, Deputy Prime Minister for Recovery of Ukraine and Minister for the Development of Communities, Territories and Infrastructure, said the 25,000 tons of wheat that will be delivered to Somalia is direct aid from the Ukrainian state. He noted that the delivery of this humanitarian cargo is being implemented with the support of the governments of Japan, France, and Finland. The Neva is the third vessel to depart from Ukraine as part of the Grain from Ukraine initiative. The first 2 ships delivered 55,000 tons of wheat to Ethiopia. According to the Ministry of Infrastructure, this amount of food is enough for almost 200,000 people per year. The ministry added that as many as 533 ships had left Ukraine's Black Sea ports since August 1, delivering 13.3 million tons of Ukrainian agricultural products to countries in Asia, Europe, and Africa. British intelligence believes Russia has begun using kamikaze drones from a new batch supplied by Iran. The UK Ministry of Defence said this in its new intelligence update published on Twitter, Ukrinform reports. According to the ministry, for the first time in 3 weeks, there have been reports of attacks by Iranian-provided one-way attack, OWA, uncrewed aerial vehicles, UAVs. These events remain to be verified, but it is likely that Russia exhausted its previous stock of several hundred Shahed 131s and 130 SIXS and has now received a resupply, the update said. On December 6, 2022, the Ukrainian General Staff reported shooting down 17 UAVs, including 14 Shahed 130 SIXS. On December 7, 2022, Ukrainian officials reported the use of Iranian-provided UAVs targeting the Zaporizhia and Dnipro regions. The last previously reported shooting down of Iranian Shahed 130 SIXS in Ukraine was on November 17, 2022. If verified, it is likely that Russia has recommenced attacks with newly delivered UAV systems, the ministry said. Of the total number of missiles fired by the Russian army on Ukraine since February 24, 62% were hit civilian targets. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said this at the International Conference Human Rights in Dark Hours, dedicated to the 74th anniversary of the adoption and proclamation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the UN General Assembly, according to an Ukrinform correspondent. The head of state said Russian crimes in Ukraine and against Ukrainians are unprecedented since the Second World War. Ukrainian cities and our towns, our villages, which the Russian artillery simply breaks into stones, not one, not two, but dozens of such destroyed towns and villages. Air terror, missile terror, attacks by the Russian Federation, which are so reminiscent of the Nazi bombardment of Britain, London. Of all the missiles fired by the Russian army since February 24, 62% targeted civilian objects. They targeted people. They targeted humanity, Zelensky said. He also talked about the filtration camps created by the Russians in Ukraine, discovered torture camps and mass burial sites. He also mentioned the forced deportation of Ukrainians by the Russians. More than 2 million people were deported. Illegal adoption into Russian families of our Ukrainian children who were actually kidnapped, they were kidnapped from Ukraine. Criminal mobilization of Ukrainian citizens in the occupied territory into the occupation army. All these are real examples, Zelensky said. He also mentioned mine terror against Ukrainians, constant shelling, casualties in the regions bordering Russia and in the frontline areas. This is such a terrible volume of committed crimes and destroyed people's destinies and lives. All this is true, it is a tragedy of such a scale, Zelensky added. Russian troops have shelled hospitals in Kherson and Beryslav in the Kherson region. Yaroslav Yanushevich, head of the Kherson Regional Military Administration, said this on Telegram, Ukrinform reports. Unfortunately, one person was injured in the Russian shelling of a medical facility in Kherson. Doctors operated on him, the condition of the wounded is stable, he wrote. He added that the Russians had hit the hospital building in Kherson, with shells damaging the children's department and the morgue. Recently, the Russian occupiers opened fire on a hospital in Beryslav. 3 enemy shells hit the hospital. The shelling of the medical facility damaged the roof of the therapeutic building and broke windows in many buildings, Yanushevich said. According to him, the shelling seriously damaged the hospital's utility building. No patients or staff of the medical facility were injured. Photo credit, Kherson Regional Military Administration. Today we were talking about those news. Zelensky, Sunak discuss defense, energy cooperation, peace formula. Russia has already fired more than 1,000 missiles and drones at Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Germany will send self-propelled howitzers, pickup trucks, counter-drone equipment to Ukraine. Minister Marchenko, total aid committed to Ukraine has already reached €113 billion. Ambassador Brink, USA, G7 countries support Zelensky's peace plan. Estonia sends 11 buses with generators, energy equipment to Ukraine. Grain from Ukraine, third vessel with Ukrainian wheat leaves port of Odesa. UK intelligence, Russia started using Iranian drones from new batch. Over 60% of missiles fired by Russia at Ukraine hit civilian targets, Zelensky. Invaders shell hospitals in Kherson, Beryslav.